Well, hello everybody and welcome back to Kagyu Samyuzong Edinburgh, in the room or online. Equally welcome wherever you are. And so we're going to be continuing our study of the Four Noble Truths with session 2 this will be. But before that, let's say the refuge prayer, the refuge to the three jewels, refuge and bodhicitta. We'll say that once in English and twice in the Tibetan phonetics. And then the four immeasurables, once in English and once in the Tibetan phonetics. Okay? In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood, for the benefit of all beings. O Sanje Chotang Suji Chonam La Changcho Badu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jin Suji Pe Sonamji Dola Penche Sanje De Parsho Sanje Chotang Suji Chonam La Changcho Padu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jin Suji Pe Sonamji Dola Penche Sanje De Parsho. May all beings be happy and create the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion, free of bias to friends or enemies. O Sem Chen Tam Che Dewa Tan Dewe Jitan Dempa Jochik Dunyal Tan Dunyal Chi Jutan Trawa Jochik Dunyal Mepe Dewa Tampa Tang Mindrawa Jochik Nyering Chadan Trawahi Tanyom Chempula Nepa Jorji. Okay, so you can put this to one side. We won't be using it till the end of the session. So the Four Noble Truths. So if you remember the last the session that we did sort of cover the first and second of the Noble Truths. Did you manage to reflect and study and meditate on them? Anybody? I'll take that as a no, or maybe just a little bit. Okay, so you really do have to do that, because otherwise it's pointless. These are to be reflected on and studied and meditated on. These are very, very precious, precious, precious Buddha's teachings, So just to read through them with me is fine, but that's just like studying a menu without eating any food. So of course you need to know what to study and the importance of it. These teachings are extremely fundamental. If you want to, if you are serious about being on the Buddhist path, the path to Buddhahood, this is what you need to base it on. This is the most important thing. So it's up to you. I'm not the Dharma police, but I'm just saying, otherwise it's just kind of entertainment, holy entertainment, a little bit like that. So, and because each of these truths are extremely profound, if you keep adding on more and more, but without having gone into the others, it's sort of like, again, if I take a restaurant metaphor, it's like, you've sort of had one thing and you've not finished it, but then you have another thing and you're not finished that either, and then you actually don't get the nourishment. You just eat bits of things and probably not so useful. So anyway, in the first truth, do you remember what the first truth is? The suffering of samsara, isn't it? The first truth is the suffering, that there is suffering. When we look at these truths, it's like we're looking to see for ourselves, is this true? And then if we go into it, we know that it's called the truth of suffering, that there is suffering. Then we need to look into it. Then we can say with confidence, there is suffering. Because we've looked into it, we've not just read it or heard it, we've actually looked into it for ourselves. We see how we suffer, how others suffer. Because until we're sure of that, then the second noble truth, do you remember what that is? The causes of suffering. So first we need to establish for ourselves that there is suffering. And then we need to do the same with the second one. So what are the causes of suffering? We went through them the last session. How does that work? How does that work in my life? And only then can we say with confidence that there are causes of suffering, and that, yes, I've understood the causes of how suffering is caused. And then that leads on to the third noble truth, which we're going to be doing today. So the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, the stopping of suffering. Is it possible to even stop suffering? And so one of the main aspects of this is karma, because in the last session we did see that that we cause, to a huge degree, we ourselves cause our suffering. So we need to understand how this works. So in this we explore the karma or actions. Karma means actions. So the actions that arise from mistaken views, because we're talking about the suffering side of it, so the mistaken views or the lack of understanding that lead to suffering, and also how we can let them go. So first we have to understand, how are we confused? Because it's the confused mind that acts in confused ways. The body doesn't just do stuff by itself, the mouth doesn't just do by itself, it comes from a confused mind, doesn't it? The mind directs the actions. So we need to look at where we are confused, how we are confused. It's like if we're kind of in a prison of confusion. If we want to escape that confusion, we have to understand it. If it was a physical prison, we would need to know where the keys are, if it's possible to tunnel out, how do we get out of here? So in the same way, we need to investigate our mind to see where our confusion is. And that's not easy, because we're very good at seeing how other people might be confused, and they really should be doing this and not that. But we don't know ourselves. We don't know where we're confused, and that's why we need to really investigate this, because otherwise we keep making the same mistakes again and again and again. So if you're serious about being on the Buddhist path to Buddhahood, which means to reveal your own Buddha nature, this is what we need to do. There's nothing more important, really. So we need to understand how our mistaken views lead to mistaken actions, and then how we can let them go. I mean, it's not easy, but that's how to do it. We created it, and we experience the results, and we can also choose to learn from them or ignore them and not learn anything, and then just keep repeating the same old mistakes. So it's up to us. It's nobody else's responsibility. And even if they could try to they couldn't undo the actions that we do. The Buddha himself couldn't do that. You have to do that. I have to do that. We have to do that. But we created the problems, we experienced the results, and we can also choose to learn from those results, and that's why suffering is actually valuable, because it's through suffering that we learn what not to do, if we pay attention to it. If we don't pay attention to it, then we just keep repeating the same stuff. So when we abandon the negative actions, the negative karma, then our actions become virtuous. You know, we don't have to make a virtuous act. By abandoning the confusion, the negative aspect, the positive aspect is there. We don't have to do anything special on top, because our innate nature is virtuous, is pure, is Buddha. So therefore, we need to abandon the negative karma. And to do that, we first need to understand and abandon unvirtuous actions. So we need to identify them. So let us see what His Eminence Thrangu Rinpoche has to say on this topic. So the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, through which it is explained that the causes of karma and the defilements can be removed. We have control over suffering because karma and the defilements take place within us. It's our behavior. We create them, we experience them. And for that reason, we don't need to depend on anyone else to remove the causes of suffering. It's in our hands. This is key. If we don't do it, nobody's going to come along and just sort of help you out with this. I mean, we're helping each other by listening to the Dharma, but then it's up to us. This noble truth is the truth of universal origination. It's showing you how things originate and how the cycle moves, how it turns. And so what it means is that if we do unvirtuous actions, we are creating suffering. It also means that if we abandon unvirtuous actions, we remove the possibility of experiencing suffering in the future, because there's no cause for it anymore. Yeah? Unvirtuous actions will definitely produce unvirtuous results. If you don't do the unvirtuous action, there is not an unvirtuous result, because there's no seed been planted of that. Yeah? It's up to us. It's our actions. Our actions are dictated by our mind. So what we experience is entirely in our hands. I mean, that's good news, really, isn't it? It means we're in the driving seat. So we can be in control if we take control, or we can just be like a leaf in the wind and don't know what's going on. Why always me? But it's us that are creating stuff, you know. So we have to take responsibility for it. So when we look at the kind of actions we're talking about, you can sort of subdivide them into mental, physical, and verbal. But as I said, everything starts in the mind. But we'll sort of begin with the actions first. So let's look at the physical ones first. So also these, the mental, verbal, and physical, but these also can be subdivided into virtuous and non-virtuous. So unvirtuous or virtuous or unvirtuous physical actions, virtuous and unvirtuous verbal actions, and virtuous and unvirtuous mental actions. So here he says that if one abandons these three types of unvirtuous actions, then one's actions, whether physical, mental, or verbal, automatically become virtuous, because that's their pure nature. If we take out the negative, we're left with the innate positiveness of them. So we're talking about removing the causes of negative karma and then revealing what we might call positive karma, or useful, helpful, pure. Okay, are you with me? So let's look at the more simple ones first. So we'll look at the unvirtuous physical actions. So put very kind of, if you're making a list of them, you could just say, in no particular order. This sounds like I'm doing a results or a competition. In no particular order, we have sexual misconduct, stealing, any kind of stealing, whether by theft or robbery or deception, and then killing or harming of life or taking life, killing or harming life. So, I mean, for example, if we take the sexual misconduct one, so if you think about the modern world today, I mean, there's a lot of sort of leeway for misconduct, but I think mainly what they're talking about is what is going to be helpful in your life or what is going to be harmful in your life. Never mind what the fashion is, or the particular sort of mores of the day, which changes all the time, and some of it is extremely harmful and negative. But if we just, keep it to the sort of main points, I would say, or Thrangu Rinpoche says, based on the Buddha's teachings, he's saying, like, for example, when there is a virtuous relationship between people who care about each other, who protect and love each other, and have a lot of affection for each other, that will be a positive relationship because they are looking after each other. It's not based on I want you and you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything, or you do what I say, and you're looking out for that person, you care for that person. So that's an example of a virtuous relationship. So if you think of the opposite of that, where there's no commitment, there's no sort of much care, it's just based on desire, wanting, I want you, you do this, that kind of transaction sort of thing, then that's coming from quite a selfish place, isn't it? I want, you do what I tell you, when I tell you, and if the other person is like that as well, or one's sort of, you get, a controlling or manipulative relationship, that is not going to produce anything positive. That's going to have a very negative effect, isn't it? And then, I don't have to tell you, you're all grown-ups, but there are many ways that people can act in very impure ways with their bodies. And what you see on social media, I don't go on it, but I know what's on it, sort of thing, is very largely really negative. And then people wonder, why is there so much misogyny these days, and why is there, how strange, it didn't used to be like that before. I mean, there's always been, problems with that, but I'd say these days it's vastly exacerbated by really negative stuff that's online. Not just online, but that's one of the main modern ways that negative, unvirtuous behaviour, where also it's made for making money, It's become a commodity. So obviously not to engage in anything like that. And then if we're looking at stealing or theft, those people who are stealing, or robbing each other. Yes, they might have some ill-gotten gains for a while, but those come and go. They can be won but then lost. But not only that, they can be arrested, they can be in jail, they can be imprisoned. Whether or not they get imprisoned is down to the law and their own karma, but the karma that they cannot escape is that of karma, is that of the results of their actions. Whether or not they manage to escape going to prison because of them, that's a human concern, but karma is unerring. And so if you do a negative act, whether it's stealing something or whatever it is, you will get the results from that, and they won't be pleasant, And then again, with the with taking life or killing or harming, whatever you do to harm others will really come back at you, in one way or another. Sometimes it is, in a way, it can be helpful for you to be found out by the law, because then at least you will know that you've done something wrong and you will experience some punishment. That doesn't mean to say you've necessarily cleared that karma, but it might go some way towards it. Whereas if you don't get caught, then you sort of seemingly get off with it, but you haven't actually got off with it, so you're still lumbered with all the negative karma that will come out either in this life or in the lives to come. Unless you confess and you purify that karma. And pretty much most karma, in fact all karma really can be purified, but not easily. It takes a lot of effort. If you look at this in more detail in the four foundations, the 4 ways of changing the mind, and it goes into it in a lot. You have precious human life, and then you have. Anyway, that's another an allied, but another session that we don't need to get too much into that, because otherwise there won't be time to go through all this. But so let's see what he says about that. Yeah, he doesn't really go into that too much, but it's basically, if you do these negative acts, whether it's a killing or stealing, you're creating negative outcomes for others and for yourself. And the same applies to one's speech, which may not seem so obvious, but if you really look into it, one can also see how if you speak kindly and well and truthfully, and then good results come from that. And also you will be respected, because people will get to know that you're honest and you don't tell lies, and you're not trying to cheat them, and you'll form friendships, and the outcome will be good. But at first, lying, if you're lying to people, you might think you've gained some sort of advantage. They've believed you, they've seemingly believed you, but it won't take long before they start to realize that no, you're not being honest, you're telling lies, and that they'll know that they've been deceived. And if they're your friends, so-called friends, then you might be able to deceive them at first by telling a lie, but soon they'll get your number, and they'll think you've been such a hypocrite. So lying doesn't really work for very long, and even if it does work in the sense of fooling somebody or deceiving them, you won't experience anything good from that. But if you look at the opposite, if you look at someone who takes the pains to speak the truth, they will develop a good reputation. People will trust them. It can be relied on, and then good relationships form. So once we've considered the example and consequences of lying, we can think of other similar consequences sort of about speech, which, I mean, you know, if you think of how much unkind speech there is, I think these days you hear a lot of negative speech just walking down the street or on a bus or something. You know, people are quite aggressive a lot of the time, not always obviously, but it's noticeable, you know, a lot of swearing or just harsh speech. And often it's it can be hurtful, it can be useless. And I'm talking not only about verbal as in the spoken word, but also written. You know, you get slandered, and that's a form of speech. And then you get fake stuff going on, fake speech, untrue stuff. The so-called social, or what I call anti-social media, which really can hurt people. You know, with lies about them, slander about them, and even lead to their suicides. This happens with quite, you know, you must have read about this, young people killing themselves because they can't bear the pain of it. So non-virtuous speech can be a big problem. And it seems to be more so these days. I think so anyway. So, also then, as well as that, there's you can say that unvirtuous speech definitely produces suffering. Then there's the kind of, not so serious, but kind of useless speech, the sort of just, not totally negative, certainly not positive, just kind of, I'm not talking about just conversational and social, and that's of course necessary to oil the wheels of sociability, but really kind of gossipy, sort of, tends to be always on the negative side. It tends to turn negative very quickly. Of course, if you're just, you know, chatting to somebody and making them feel at ease, and then of course, you know, you don't have to be preaching or anything like that, but just make people feel at ease and comfortable, that's great. But chatter that's sort of rooted in the defilements, where you're saying bad things about other people because you dislike them, or you're jealous of them, or you want to bring them down, or you're just gossiping about them. I mean, there's a lot of magazines are devoted to just that, aren't they? You know? So that speech can be very harmful. On the other hand, you can be, you know, sometimes you need to have a sort of quite strong speech. If you may be teaching your child how to behave, you might, you know, have to be quite serious for a bit, but that's not harmful, that's useful. You know, it doesn't always have to be there and placatory and everything's going to be fine when it maybe isn't, you know. Be realistic. You don't have to sugar the pill all the time, you know. I think if there's a very genuine, beneficial attitude and love behind what is saying, if the motivation is to help and be kind, ultimately by helping, then it's not harmful speech. But if it's related to the defilements such as aggression or jealousy, then it's something we definitely need to give up. So that's looking at, briefly at the non-virtuous speech. And then we come down to the root of the problem, which is non-virtuous states of mind, because that's what produces the unvirtuous speech or unvirtuous actions. So if we go on to examine the various states of mind, we can see that a virtuous mind produces happiness. An unvirtuous mind comes from and creates more unhappiness, negativity. You know, you think in a negative way, you act in a negative way, you speak in a negative way. You think in a virtuous way, it produces a more happy outcome, definitely. For instance, strong aggression, if we're habitually aggressive, we're not going to have many friends, are we, really? I mean, there might be a few at the beginning, but when they see what we're going to be like, and it's not just the odd time, but it's quite habitual, then we're going to end up being no mates, for sure. And because of our aggressiveness, our enemies will become even worse enemies. So whatever enemies we started out with, or people that we had mild sort of disagreement, will become more so, because they're receiving our aggression. They'll probably hit back with aggression, and that's how, you know, on a small scale, you can come to blows with each other. Even you could even end up harming each other physically, certainly mentally. Maybe you might even come to murder. That's taken to that result. And then if you look at it on a global scale, that's how wars start, isn't it? You just magnify it by times whatever, and you get some dictators in charge. You don't have to look very far. And then there's war. Because that's the way they're behaving. They're coming from a negative place, it's going to have negative actions. The only difference in a war, everybody else gets caught up in it as well. So I wouldn't like their karma. Wouldn't fancy their karma. Of course, they're so blinded by what they want to do and this ego-based way of thinking that it doesn't even enter their mind. So if you think like that, you can maybe even drum up some compassion for the instigators of such, who are so blinded by aggressive behavior and intent on ruling others and causing, just after their own, feeding their own ego, basically. But in that, many other people get really harmed. And they do as well, except they don't realize it. So because of our aggressiveness, our enemies will become even worse, and the whole situation will become inflamed. And if we are aggressive and hurt others, they have friends, then eventually the friends will also become enemies, and so it proliferates. On the other hand, if we wish to benefit others, goodness will come out of it, through the power of caring for our loved ones, and then through wishing to help them develop goodness. Through this, they will be close and helpful friends. And then that also spreads, you know, the positive aspect spreads. If we have companions and wish to benefit others, we can end up with very good friends and all the benefits that brings. So in this way we can see how cause and effect operate, and how a virtuous mind brings about happiness and a non-virtuous mind brings about sufferings and problems. I mean, it makes total sense, doesn't it? It's of course, karma is an extremely vast and complex subject, but looked at in a sort of fairly simple way, it makes total sense. And it puts us in control. We're not just at the whim of some punitive beings or something, you know. We have it within ourselves to change the direction, our direction, onto being onto the path, preferably. That would be the best. Which is where this is leading. So, but there's another aspect about karma, because so far what we've looked at is non-virtuous states of mind, such as aggression, anger, jealousy, you know, greed, pride, all of these non-virtuous states of mind, or the afflictions, mind poisons, sometimes it's referred to the mind poisons. All of these are stemming from ignorance, but the root cause. But all of these things lead to us thinking in a negative way, and that produces negative outcomes that we and others experience. So that's how it works, isn't it? But there's another aspect to karma. So that one, the one we've just spoken about, is kind of talks about the experience, what we experience because of it. But there's also another aspect, which is conditioning. And I don't think maybe we give that enough thought. Because the aspect of karma relating to conditioning means that by acting unvirtuously with one's body, speech or mind, we become habituated to that way of acting. And it becomes a habit, even addiction. It becomes the way that we are. We think, well, that's how, I can't change, that's the way I am, that's who I am. Well, you chose the way you are. We choose the way we are, and we can change the way we are. So if you see something in yourself that you don't like, don't think you're stuck with it forever. First of all, celebrate that you've seen it, because most of the time we don't. We're always looking at everyone else and think, oh, they don't do that, and they've got, or even if you put it on a physical level, oh, she's got a big black mark on her face, but you don't see the big black mark on your face, or a piece of spinach on your tooth, or whatever it is, the mote in your eye, to put it more biblically. We only look at the faults of others, we don't see our own faults. So we have to really, that's why we meditate, and you change the focus from looking out and picking on other people and saying how terrible they are. Look at yourself and see what's causing your suffering. If you want to get rid of it, you need to see what's causing it. So the motivation is completely positive. You're not delving in because you like suffering and what's all this suffering, I'll give me more. It's to get out of it. Get out of it, you need to understand what's going on. Really understand it. Because if you don't, you will get habituated to certain ways of acting that you'll think, oh, well, that's my character, that's the way I am, I can't help it. Unvirtuous physical or verbal behaviours such add to the habit of doing things. So, for example, each time we kill, it might be an insect. But you kill that insect, that's like not acknowledging that being has the right to live. But you just swat it, That starts to build up a little bit of you've already kind of crossed a bit of a line there, And then it'll be could be something else, and then you will easily kill. Because we're conditioning ourselves that it's okay, it's just a fly or something, And then we can always make excuses and think, oh, well, it's the dog, it's injured or it's sick. I'll get it put down, I'll have to get it put down. Do you have to get it put down? Is it just inconvenient that you have to look after an animal that's sick? The same. I'm not giving you any answers, I'm just putting it out there, something to think about. And then you could think about assisted dying if you want. So, or, if we're talking about lying, we lie, we tell a little, it's just a little white lie, Sometimes it might be the right thing to do is to tell a lie, a white lie, if it has a very positive motivation. So say somebody is coming in here looking for Marcus and he doesn't like it, means business, I'm not getting it, and I'll say I don't know where he is or something. So I'm telling a lie, but I'm saving Marcus from getting some terrible thing happening. So there are instances like that where a lie would be the better thing to do. But generally speaking, when we often lie just for our own advantage, because it's just easier, you know why you lie. I don't know why you lie. I know why I've lied. And then you kind of excuse it because it's not that bad. Nobody died. That's what we say, don't we? Nobody died. As if that makes it all right, The more we lie, the more it increases our habit of lying, and then they get a bit more and a bit more and a bit more serious. They don't just stop at one level, it gets worse. So better not go there. And it's the same with all of them. An aggressive mind conditions our state of mind, so we become more aggressive. We start to swear, you swear more. You start to shout, you shout more. And then in later lives, in other words, in other lives after this one is finished and we're born again and again and again, but this conditioning comes with us. It's the mind that's going with us. The body doesn't come with us. We're not taking that with us, but we take the mind with us and the state of our mind. So if we're conditioned to act in negative ways, that comes with us, and that's why your karma, any karma that's not been paid off in the present life, will definitely catch up with you. The debtors come chasing you into other lives. You know, that it's not just one. That's why it's better to pay it off in this life. And we could, you know, sometimes we can look at any sicknesses that we get or anything that you think, oh, it's not my fault, why is that? You know, maybe you're paying off some karma. In fact, I would say definitely you're paying off some karma, because nothing happens without a reason. So it gives you another way of looking at things, and then things that seem to be a bit unfair, maybe you're not so unfair, it's just that something's catching up with you. It's hard to do that. It's quite a high point of view to be able to live through that, but that's where we're going with it. So whatever the case, in later lives that conditioning will re-emerge, and so we will be reborn with whatever that tendency was, whether it's to kill or to lie or to engage in sexual misconduct, etc. So these are the two aspects. One is the direct consequence of an act, and the other is the conditioning that creates the tendency to engage in that behavior. And that, through these, the two aspects of karma produce all happiness and all suffering in life, depending on whether they're positive, skillful, helpful, or the opposite. Even though we may recognize that unvirtuous karma gives rise to suffering and virtuous karma gives rise to happiness, so even though we get it, we understand that, it's still hard for us to give up unvirtuous actions and practice virtuous actions, because the defilements exercise such a powerful influence on us. They become habitual, so it's hard to get out of. Can you see that in your own life, how you become sort of accustomed to a certain way of behaving, and you think that's how, or have you noticed that and then managed to somehow get out of it? You know, for example, you might have been addicted to something, and then you know how hard that is. People drink a lot, you know, or take drugs or something. You know it's harmful, but you still do it, or smoking, or whatever it is, you know. Those things are kind of easy to identify because they're kind of visible. But they come, you know, from negative attitudes, and then it gets entrenched. And then it's hard, isn't it? That's why habit turns into an addiction, because it gets so entrenched. Some are more harmful than others. We harm ourselves. And we can help ourselves. So, if we realize that suffering is caused by unvirtuous karma, but we can't give up the karma itself, we need to give up the defilements, because they are the root of unvirtuous actions. You don't just act randomly. It's the defilements at the root. Yeah, so we talked about those before, the ignorance, the desire, the attachment side of things, the wanting, I want, or alternatively, I don't want. So that's the aversion, the aggression. And then you get the subdivisions of jealousy and greed and all of those things that, for example, because you want, you might be greedy, so then, you see this and it's somebody else's, but they won't notice, and you'll excuse yourself. They won't notice. They've already got another one anyway, so, you'll find an excuse. And you can take that, steal that thing, whatever it is, Or just try and justify it in your mind that it's not that bad. But every time you do something, it's another step along the way, the wrong path. And then you put another foot on that path and another one, and it becomes a very deep groove. Or you don't. You can see things and you decide, okay, well, this isn't helping. But first we have to see it, and that's really, really important. So we need to look at ourselves and adapt the way we behave. So we behave according to how we think. But how we think is the most important. So we have got help, though. We're very fortunate. So we look at these aspects of karma, the experience that we're actually experiencing, and also the conditioning that we're not only in this life but for future lives. If we've got any kind of hope of getting out of that, then we need help. But we're lucky because the Buddha, his great kindness and wisdom, has given us a very skillful way to eliminate the very root of all the defilements. Anybody got a clue what that might be? The real root of them? Well, ignorance, but the main part of the ignorance, what we're most ignorant about, is through the examination of the belief in the existence of a self, an entity, an I. And this is really hard because it's so deep-rooted. Our ego, our self, our view of self. And it's not easy to understand that this belief in a self, because it's so, that it isn't really like that, is because it's so deep-rooted. So if there isn't a self, well, how does that work then? First of all, we have to search for this self, what we think of as a self, that we believe in. And through this search, we can discover that the self does not exist. This is Buddha saying this, so we should pay attention, but we can't, even though we know Buddha said this, we don't get it, do we? We can't just say, oh right, that's fine then, no self, fine. No, because we're so habituated to this mistaken view of a self. Of course, we all have a body, and this body is my body, that body is your body. But if somebody asks, who are you? Would you say that you're your body? Would you? Would you say, yeah, we have a body. So if you have a body, it sounds like the bodies are like a possession or something that we have. But who are you? This is what we need to do, to look at. Thrangu Rinpoche sort of explains it. So he says, well, we have to first search for it. First of all, we have to search for this self that we believe in, and through this search we can discover that the self does not exist. Then we will be able to gradually eliminate the belief in the self. Gradually eliminate. It's not like that. Because when this is done, the defilements are also eliminated. These mind poisons, all the things that we've been talking about, because with an elimination of the belief in self, unvirtuous karma is also eliminated. It's all down to this mistaken view of I, me, I want this, I don't want that, I'm better than them, they're worse than me, I don't like them, I do, but I like them because they're my family. Except when I don't like what they're doing, then I don't like them. So none of it's got any reality because it changes all the time. Otherwise, you'd always be the same with everybody and you'd have the same friends and nothing would ever change. But it does change because we're at the mercy of our wants and not wants, our aversion and desire. So this belief in a self is a mistaken perception. It's an illusion. It seems to be like that, but it isn't like that. We identify so closely with our bodies that we think, this is me, and then we get a name, I've got a few, it's quite confusing. I never know whether I'm going to be Ani Rinchen Khandro or sometimes I'm Jacqueline Glass, and then there's other versions of that. My news agent thinks I'm called Anya. I don't know why. It's harder to say than Annie. And then most Scottish people think I'm called Annie, the name Annie. But that's okay if that's just me, the only nun in the place. But when there's a few, and everybody doesn't know who they're talking to, so. So it's just a name, it's just a label. So I don't, I do that. There's something on my passport, and there's a different thing on the literature for this place, for example. So I'm known as Ani Rinchen Khandro here, another place I'll be something else. And, you probably, some people get married and they change their names for that. So that's just a label that you put on something that doesn't exist. There's nothing in the tin. So this is a mistaken perception. If, for example, Thrangu Rinpoche says, if you have a flower and you were to interrogate 100 people about it, they would all come to the same conclusion that yes, indeed, that is a flower. You could be pretty sure that it's a flower. But if you ask a person, is this me? What would you say if I say, is this me? What would you say? Huh? You would say yes. How do you know? Anyway, what he's saying here is, no, it's you. So to you, I'm you. And to me, you're you. So there's no actual designation that holds, is there? Or you'd end up with 100 people who would say, this is you, and only one, i.e. me, that would say, this is me. So statistically, we're on very wobbly ground already, just that simple way of looking. But we also tend to think of me as one thing, as a unity. But when we examine what we think about as ourselves, we find it's made up of a lot of different components. So there's all the different parts of the body, there's all the different organs, there's so many of them, there's the blood that comes round. These are all physical things. And by contemplating this and working through it, we begin to see how this I is really an incorrect perception. Also, even the body, you can't really say, it's certainly not the body you were born with. Every single cell has changed from that body. So where is that then? Whoever you were then, you're not now. So what happened to that me? So this is and then what happens when that body dies? So does that mean that there's no consciousness, there's no mind? If that was the case, then there would be no more lifetimes. There would have been a beginning and an end, but there is no beginning and there is no end. So this is a very fundamental understanding of Buddhism, which you need to kind of get your head round. So once we've eliminated this wrong way of thinking of an I, once you've really gone into it and you can see that it's kind of, how does that work then? Who is this I? But you can't just sort of read this thing and then say, right, that's it, I get it, I've just read about it, so I know there's no more right, that's it. It's not easy. You've had countless lifetimes of thinking about of being this I. So you're not going to get it in 5 minutes that naturally that's not the way it is. I mean, sometimes I think, and this is not in here, and this is incorrect what I'm about to say, but I think it might be helpful. If you think of raindrops coming down the window, this is what happens sometimes on the raindrop. I'm just looking at the raindrops coming down, and they're all different. That's a drop there, that's a drop there, that's a drop there. But they all end up in a watery puddle at the bottom of the window. So there's no kind of differentiation. They had a momentary appearance for that little lifetime, and then they've merged. Or if you take it on a bigger scale, you could say, oh, there's a wave. That is a thing, isn't it? A wave. It's called a wave. We label it a wave. It has an appearance. It has a sort of lifespan, you could say, with certain conditions, wind and water, and it's this sort of shape, and then it dissolves back into the sea from whence it came. I think we're more like that, more like a wave that has an appearance, but actually part of the whole. That's the kind of thing that occurs to me. I mean, it is a metaphor, but it helps me to understand a little bit. And maybe, I don't know, I'm just saying. Anyway, once we've eliminated this way of thinking of an I as a separate entity, then I becomes easier to get rid of. So all of the desire rooted in thinking, I must be made happy. I mean, I'm the one that matters here. Number one. Think about number one. That's what we're told, isn't it? Be the best. Think about number one. When you see the faults in that I must be made happy can be eliminated as well, as all the aversion rooted in the idea of this must be eliminated because I don't like that, that's out of my life, I do not like that. So if you don't have that attitude, you save yourself a whole lot of trouble. This difficulty must be eliminated, that nice thing must be improved, giving me more of that one. So you're going through life, and through the elimination of the idea of I, we can annihilate the defilements. And once the defilements are gone, then, so in other words, without this ego, there is no jealousy, there is no pride, there is no greed, there isn't I want that, I don't want that. And once that's gone, then there's no reason to act in a negative way. So you won't steal, and you won't kill, and you won't speak horribly to people or whatever. So once the defilement's gone, the unvirtuous karma which is rooted in the defilements can go. And once the unvirtuous karma is gone, suffering will no longer take place. And that is why Buddha says that the root of suffering needs to be abandoned. The root of suffering needs to be abandoned. What do you think? Can you see some sense in this? Some people nodding, some people looking a little bit lost, but don't worry about it. It's not easy. We've had this habit for many, many lifetimes, so don't expect to understand it or feel it straight away. But if you feel an inkling, if there's a little opening, look through that opening. If you see there's some truth in this, look at that. So, when you take refuge, because you want to follow the Buddha's teachings. This is what it's for. It's not about, learning pujas and doing this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, of course, because everything is going in the same direction. But at the root of it is this. Everything else is a way how to do that, different kind of paths along the way, but the paths are all going in the same direction. So we need to keep the focus on why we're doing this. Are we just wanting to learn Buddhist art or Buddhist or Tibetan language or Sanskrit? Or people study these things in university who are not Buddhists because they're not on the Buddhist path, but it's kind of exotic. It's quite nice. I can get a degree in it. If that's your motivation, that's fine. You go ahead and be a scholar. And I'm not dissing scholars in any way, but that's not the Buddhist path. That's sort of knowing about something without applying it. It's a different thing. It's an academic thing. So to summarize, once one recognizes what suffering really is, then one begins by removing its causes. So one stops doing unvirtuous actions which create suffering. And to stop these unvirtuous activities, one digs out their roots, which are the defilements. So we have to be very honest with ourselves and say, well, I have a tendency to get a bit jealous in certain situations, or a bit aggressive, or impatient. Yeah. Impatience is a kind of anger, really. It's a sort of watered down anger, but it can quite easily become anger. So we have to be honest with ourselves and look at what's tripping us up, and deal with it, because we can. We have that ability. So we need to dig out the roots of the defilements and any of these unhealthy attitudes that are causing us suffering and others. So to eradicate the defilements, one needs to remove the heart of them. What's at the heart of the defilements is this belief in a self. This self that must be fed, that must be given all the best things, and don't anything horrible happen. That unrealistic cartoon, it's almost like a cartoon, view of oneself. And if one does that, then one will eventually it's not instant coffee, it's a long haul, will eventually come to realize the wisdom of non-self. And through understanding the absence of a self, one no longer creates the defilements, one no longer does bad actions. And you bring to the end that whole process that keeps us rooted in samsara, life after life after life. Round and round we go. When you walk out of here, look in the little passageway between the door to the shrine room and the door to the outer foyer. There's a passageway. On one side there's some photographs of the opening of this, and on the other side there is the wheel of life and death, the wheel of 12 interdependent origination. We can put the lights on, you can study it. Because that's a physical representation of what we're talking about here. So he's saying that, we no longer, when we understand the absence of a self, one no longer has a need to create these defilements and bad actions. You end that whole process, and it is highly possible to reach. Therefore, there is the third noble truth, the cessation. This is what we're talking about. This is not pie in the sky. This can be accomplished. The cessation can be accomplished. So, it isn't easy, but it's a whole lot what do you want to do? Do you just want to keep carrying on the same old, or do you want to get off of that wheel of suffering, you know? And if you've taken refuge in the Buddha's path, then I presume the answer is the second, is the latter one. So the very essence and nature of cessation is peace. Sometimes, this is Thrangu Rinpoche saying, sometimes people think of Buddhahood in terms of brilliant insights or something very spectacular and fantastic. In fact, the peace one obtains from the cessation of everything unhealthy is the deepest happiness, bliss and well-being. It's not all fireworks, you know, and boom, booms. It's the opposite of that. It's peace. Bliss. Its very nature is lasting, in contrast to worldly happiness, which is exciting for a time, but then changes, comes and goes. That's, you know, the little sort of bits of happiness we can experience. That they don't. There's nothing lasting about them. But when suffering ends, when there is cessation, means stopping, doesn't it? So then the opposite of that is nirvana, which is the cessation. There is no suffering. So what is there? Peace is there. Bliss is there. Seeing clearly is there. Understanding is there. Wisdom is there. And it's not my wisdom, or your wisdom, or my peace, or your peace. It's one. We've come home. At least that's what I think of it. It's kind of like that. We've come home to realize who we truly are. Not the little selfish, give me this, give me that, don't give me that, don't want that. Which we've been actually encouraged to be like by other ignorant people. Even our parents who, bless them, we love them, and they think they're doing the best for us, but they don't know. So we all get encouraged to proliferate the wrong way of being, unintentionally, obviously. If it's your parents, they want the best for you, but they don't always know. So you have to, you know, if you're going to listen to somebody about this, then it has to be the Buddha or somebody who's achieved a very high state of enlightenment. Or you start with reading a book or listening to teachings, and you look at it for yourself, because ultimately you've got to follow your own. You have to discover your own guru, your own Buddha. So, in contrast to the sort of exciting but very transitory so-called happiness in the worldly way, in contrast, this ultimate liberation, ultimate freedom from the imprisonment of wrong views and therefore wrong actions and chaos, basically. So in contrast, this ultimate liberation, omniscience of cessation, is the most deeply moving peace. And within that peace, all the powers of liberation and wisdom are developed. It is a very definitive release from both suffering and its results, and is a definitive release from the defilements which are the cause of suffering. These are the four main qualities of this truth of cessation. First, it is the cessation of suffering, the end of suffering. Second, it is peace. Third, it is the deepest liberation and wisdom. Fourth, it is a very definitive release. That's it. Release, freedom, peace. And cessation is a product of practicing the path shown to us by the most perfect one, the Buddha. If you practice it, you do it. You become it. You become it. the actual nature of that path is the topic of the fourth Noble Truth, which is called the Truth of the Path, because it describes the path that leads to liberation, and we're going to leave that till the next session, because I think we've already got rather a lot on our plate. So cessation is a product of practicing the path shown to us by the most perfect Buddha. Okay. I think because we're filming as well, so I think we'll leave questions till afterwards. But I think it would be good to just have a sit with all this. There's a lot to take on, and there's also a lot to take off. A lot to get rid of. So, in fact, that's maybe more to take. When I think if you can get rid of the defilements and all the negative stuff, the purity of peace is there, it's waiting to be discovered. You don't have to add anything on, really. It's a question of revealing, isn't it? But first of all, we have to just let's sit with it. We've talked quite a lot, so get yourselves in a good, straight posture. For the sake of your mind, it's good to have your body in a good, straight posture. And this isn't easy. It goes completely opposite to the worldly way of thinking, which we are completely surrounded by. So don't worry if you don't get everything straight away. It might take some time. It took Buddha many lifetimes to become enlightened. But if we just sit with it quietly and maybe just concentrate on your posture and your breathing first, just to get yourself in a good, receptive and calm state of abiding. So, noticing your breath, let go, the out-breath, aware of the in-breath through the nose, into the lungs, diaphragm, belly, holding for a few seconds, and then releasing, letting go of the out-breath fully. Then taking the next in-breath, fully, whole body, holding and releasing fully, exhaling, letting go. And so on. So staying with the breathing until your mind feels settled, body relaxed, but aware, mental awareness, physical awareness, and relaxed, non-judgmental, open, and just resting in that true, natural state. And as thoughts come up or feelings come up, you just turn them to the topics we've been discussing and applying them to yourself, seeing whatever disturbs you, looking into it, acknowledging what's maybe so a bit negative, seeing where it comes from, seeing what the likely outcome will be, just looking at all the different aspects, or whatever comes up. It's a lot to take on board, so whatever comes up, especially if you need to really look into it to understand it, or maybe you don't understand it, you need to look deeper. And it is deep. It isn't superficial. But it's the best thing you can do. If you want to be free of the suffering, you need to understand it. Where does it come from? We know that it's possible to reach a state where there is no suffering. We know this because Buddha and other great beings have done it. So we know it's possible. That should give us some encouragement. To find the release of suffering and that peace, that bliss. What can be more valuable than that? even if you feel just a few seconds of peace, even a microsecond of peace, then you get some kind of inkling of the freedom of that, you know? This ego is a massive weight we're lugging around with us, and all its demands. I want this, I don't want that. It's such a burden. Really, isn't it? Constantly demanding attention. Imagine being free of that. I mean, you know, it's just imagination that, but it maybe give you a little bit of inkling of how that must feel, so light and free and unencumbered, you know. So let's dedicate our merits for the benefit of all beings. I'll say it once in English and then say the Tibetan phonetics. Through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. O sanam de tamche sekpani, topne nipe janam pamchene, jiganachi baladukpai, sipe sale doa sho. Okay, so you know, there's literature about the Four Noble Truths if you want to be reminded, or of course you'll be able to watch the sessions that we're filming as a reminder. So you know, so there is that. But you can easily find books about the Four Noble Truths, and I don't know, I don't have any other copy from this. In fact, I didn't even know I had this until it sort of fell off my bookshelf. So I don't have any other copy, but there are books about the Four Noble Truths. Of course, it'll be different kinds of understandings. What I find so extremely valuable about this one is it's coming through the mind of Thrangu Rinpoche. So he's, you know, a great master, a great Vajrayana master, but with a fantastic grounding in all aspects of Buddhism. So it's giving you the full panoply of his intelligence and understanding and realization about these essential truths. So this third one was that to investigate, you know, that it's possible, you know, that escaping this deluded way of seeing and being is possible to escape. But we need to personalize that and look at our own particular brand of deluded thinking and how we act, and the negative side that can be, and of course the positive side as well, you know, so it's not, but that we don't need to work on because that's already okay, so we sit with what needs to be improved, changed, or seen through, let's say, and then go from there, because then the next one, so our next time we meet will be the third session, which will be on the fourth Noble Truth, the last of the Noble Truths, which is the path, the actual path. And there are many, many paths on that path, but they all go to the same way. So it's the fundamental principles of that path. But the more we go into why we need it, the more we will value it. You know, the more you apply it, the more valuable, more real it becomes, and that's the whole point of it. Oh look, the sun's out. Okay, so yeah, happy delving and discovering, and so yeah, thank you for coming, and see you again.